Oh, dog. No. Hello, and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is the podcast where we speak to some incredible, unique, and fascinating people with many stories to tell from across the comedy verse. Now, today's guest is a man who has walked all the way from Canada into Singapore and is now running one of the best comedy clubs in Singapore, or maybe the only or the best comedy club in Singapore, I should say.
The only
Oh,
the only
okay.
full-time comedy club. The only
The only
full-time comedy.
full-time comedy club. It is McDonald. Let's welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks very much.
That sounded like the end of a speech. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Do you need to do any greetings in Singapore, like any official greetings? Because in Thailand, if someone's older than you have to do this, right? But
No. You're thinking like Korea. I lived in Korea for a while, so there's a lot of like bowing and 안녕하세요 and things like that. But no, here you see, people think that they're not even sure where Singapore is. They think it's in China. So, but we're right near the equator, and it's very, very Western. And it's 75% Chinese here in Singapore. And their Mandarin is not that great. My wife is from Taiwan, so she tells me all the time that their Mandarin is not it's okay. So, but my 6-year-old, he just turned 6. His Mandarin is better than most Singaporeans. So
I hear that a lot. I hear that the main language is, I think officially they've got two languages in Singapore, English and Mandarin, but most of the times people just speak English.
well, it's English, Mandarin, and Tamil.
Oh, okay.
So every year when the prime minister does his speech on National Day, he does it in all three languages. So which is actually kind of interesting. So and I don't think anyone listens even to the first one. So they're just there for the parade and the jets shooting over and the fireworks. So I've got to admit though, I love the National Day here. It's great.
So
August
what's
9th.
Oh, bloody hell. Is there lots of like strip parties and all of that? I don't know.
It's kind of, it's very interesting because I mean there's everybody wants to go to the National Day parade, like the big arena and sit out there, so and then watch the show that they put on. It's like imagine like Super Bowl halftime. It's like that without the marching band. So even though there is a band, so a
Ah,
marching
okay.
band. So, but it's actually a lot of fun. And to be honest, Singaporeans are some of the nicest people. They have a great sense of humor. They love to laugh at themselves. They don't mind jokes that are interracial. They don't mind when you poke fun at them. They don't mind if you poke fun at other people. They know it's just a joke. So the woke culture that's very prominent out in the West is not that prominent out here. So they're still very, you know, easygoing, which is why I think the comedy scene is such a nice scene here. You can still, do fairly risque jokes, and everybody just kind of laughs along with you.
Is it so? One thing I found, there's a comedian that I know called Victor Petraskin. He's an acquaintance of mine. I'll say that.
Okay.
Um, and he makes his whole living just from traveling to different European cities and doing comedy in English. And it's amazing how many people he gets in because it's in places out of nowhere, and you'll find that there'll be a good big bunch of people wanting to do comedy in English. And
Very true.
one of the things is is the fact that the market in Singapore and Malaysia and all these other nations, because they're emerging, they're much smaller. It forces the comedians to be better quicker because people judge comedy. And you also got a lot of imports coming in because of John Atherton, but you does it force you to be quicker because people are new to comedy, so they judge it quicker?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I see comedy as really in its infantile state of in terms of its growth potential. It, it's um, it's almost like a something that you have to nurture. And since cultures go through different phases, it's growing fairly awkwardly. So that was actually one of the main reasons I wanted to open up a full-time permanent comedy club here in Singapore is I wanted to make sure that there was a place where people who wanted to try comedy had a place where they could go. Had a stage that they could try just to, even if they could just say, I went up there one time, and also a place where people who could try comedy and see if it was something that they enjoyed. And we did have this one very young comic. He got up there, and his very first time, he was terrible. I can't say his name, but his first time he went up, he was awful. And I said to him, "Go home, write out your entire story that you just told, and then come back next week." And he did, and he ended up not even telling the same story, but he told a lot more jokes and started getting laughs. And you could see that spark in his eye where he just loved it. So it was that big adrenaline rush. And so he's off doing national service right now because all Singaporeans have to do 2 years of national service. But he does come by whenever he's on leave and wants to come off and do comedy at the club. So it's nice to see that in a young potential comedian, the fact that they actually really want to go and do something that is exciting to them, something that's outside the norm. And so giving the people that potential to try something, for me, that's actually what makes it really worth it because we have a very, very limited pool in terms of comedians. So the only way to grow it is to actually, seed the field. So you'll actually get sprouts that'll grow into, full blown comedians. And we have some excellent comedians here in Singapore, from Fucka Fuzz, Rishi Putrani, Jinx Yo, Deepak Chandran. These guys are really, really good. And I see us that I think in the next 10 years we could, have easily 20, 30 really, really strong comedians coming out of Singapore to go and tour around Asia and other parts of the world.
Hmm. It's and like same in Malaysia, isn't it? They have about maybe 30 comedians that are sort of pros, and it's
Yeah, like Jason Leong, really good. Kevin J, excellent. Rizzo Van Geisel is a great comedian, and these guys they have also a much larger pool since I mean the population is much bigger. So and they're also in the same kind of growth pattern that we're in right now. They've had some of their own challenges, like Rizzo had the Comedy Crack House, and it was actually shut down due to some girl who got up in a hijab and decided she was going to do something that would not be tolerated in Islam. So, and he got the brunt of it on that one. So he started to make a comeback, but it was a really, really heavy hit on
yeah.
the comedy community. I don't know if you're aware of the story, but it was a really, really big hit on the Malaysian comedy scene.
Yeah, I bumped into him in Edinburgh as well, and I've had him on the podcast, and it was
Oh,
amazing to hear about how he built the pizza, like a pizza business with the comedy club, and then
yeah.
he told me in Edinburgh how things are completely like in his personal life and all these things happened, and his show like he talked about all these mad things, like she was part of
Oh,
some sex cult and like it's yeah, he really went through it. Like in the West, I
really
think
good.
we were quite lucky in some ways in that it doesn't happen as much. There's only one comic that I know of who's been arrested for doing comedy, and that's Count Dankula. I can't remember the full story of it in terms of doing comedy, not other things, nefarious things they've done. But yeah, that's. But I hear in other nations lots of stories about people being arrested. I mean, I heard people saying in India that people may die. In South Africa, like Long John said that well, he's called Learn More Janasi now, but he says that in South Africa, if he bombs on stage, he may die twice. So it's
Yeah. Yeah, well, fortunately, we don't go that far in Singapore. I mean, they though they don't have freedom of speech, they actually do give you a lot of leeway in terms of your, projecting your art. So, and that I give the Singapore government a lot of credit for that. I've never heard of a comedian being cracked down for their comedy before. Perhaps it's happened, but none that I've heard of. So I have a public entertainment license. So, you know, um, I think they just want so you don't have to be a family oriented 1950s comedy where you can't even swear, but they don't mind if you actually push the envelope, and they just don't want political discourse and things like that. So they're just being careful along those lines. But other than that, it's pretty wide open. And it's nice to have the oversight.
is it would that possibly happen here? What happened to Reza Van Gazel if you're not careful? Could that happen in Singapore?
Not here, no. I mean it would depend. Like I actually had somebody who wanted to do a private show, but it wasn't going to be a private because they're going to be selling the tickets publicly, and um, they were defending themselves in a lawsuit. And then when I got more details, I found out that it was really wasn't something I wanted the club to be associated with. And so I actually I shut that show down after about a week after agreeing to it. And I don't know if I should really get into. Well, okay, I might as well tell you the details of it. I won't mention names, but it turned out that it was like going to be like an anti-vax show, and
Oh,
yeah, but I they didn't present when we were talking, they didn't present it as an anti-vax show. They said they were being wrongfully accused and trying to raise money for their legal fees, and they were going to have some keynote speakers there. And then I had somebody who was not even associated with the comedy scene reach out and say, "Are you doing an anti-vax show?" And I was like, "What?" And so I that's when I actually started doing some my due diligence on who this person was. And then I reached out and I said, listen, are these keynote speakers approved by the Singapore Police Force? Because if you have certain keynote speakers, um, you actually have to get them.
oh,
What they do is they submit their speech to SPF, and then they just get it. Okay, it's been reviewed, and then you're allowed to do it. So, and they said, well, we don't need it for the PL. I said, no, 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 no. I said, I'm not having these people up unless their speeches are approved by the Singapore Police Force. So, please have them submit it, and then if they do, then we can actually do this again. I'll have to admit, I was around the time of my public entertainment license renewal, and that renewal was not forthcoming. I actually had to do an appeal to see why I was not being put through. So I don't know if it had anything to do with that, but the timing was
too
suspicious.
close. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking like, and as soon as I found out that this was like something it was an anti-vax show or could even be construed as an anti-vax show, to be honest, I dropped it like a hot potato. So I did have some people say, "Oh, you should have stuck to your guns." I was thinking like, no, no thanks. I like living in Singapore. So
It's not worth putting the risk of like the comedy club for
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, exactly. I'd have to actually risk my club for somebody else's point of view. And I thought, no, because I certainly didn't. I certainly didn't coincide with their views on vaccinations. Since I mean, I was vaccinated for COVID, and I was vaccinated for. We vaccinated our son for all the things kids get vaccinated for. So I know there are side effects of vaccinations, of course, but it's not something that, I'm going to roll the dice on polio and things like that. So I thought, let's just go with the vaccination aspect of it. I'm totally fine with that.
No. Yeah, that's an interesting, and yeah, yeah, Singapore and the scene in Asia. I know that I read an article that like Hong Kong was the first full-time comedy club, but the comedy scene in sort of Asia is
Take out comedy.
emerging and
It is.
is
We're getting there. The COVID was brutal on the comedy scene here, but even before it happened, we weren't getting a lot of there weren't a lot of open mics, and you can't introduce new comedians unless you have real open mics that are open up to anybody. So a lot of the open mics that were there were people who had actually already been doing comedy for a while, trying to work on new material and stuff. And you could see a pattern where every couple of years there'd be like a new crop of comedians, people who were actually really dedicated to doing comedy all the time. And so that happened back in like 2010 to 2012, 2014. And then it's kind of stopped. I didn't. So I mean, 2019. I don't know anybody who'd come been a new comedian since maybe 2016 would be the last time there was somebody new on the scene, and then COVID happened, and so that was basically 5 years of no new batch of comedians, and um, that's when I thought, no, we really need a place, and so I actually have my open mic every week, and I've actually opened up a second one now that we do on Fridays that I call Funny Fridays. So now we're doing two open mics a week, and in terms of people signing up, the list is packed every week. So I want to make sure people get a real fair shake. Back in 2019, I was only getting about maybe 20 minutes of comedy per month based on because there wasn't a lot of stage time. Blue Jazz had closed down. There was Masala was only once a week on a Tuesday, and there was the Mary Lion, which was they did like 4 or 5 shows a week, but they were very limited as well in terms of like your stage time. Because if you think about it, everybody wants to get up on stage. So there was I thought there was a real drought in terms of availability for people to go up and do open mic. And so now I'm kind of really committed to that. Plus, we do our big shows. We do our pro night on Saturday, and then we have
hmm,
some of the top comics like Kumar, who's a very popular comic in Singapore. He does 2 shows a month at the Lemon Stand, and we are starting to grow, and people are actually now starting to see the fact that we have a full-time comedy club. So we're getting a lot more recognition, especially in the last, I would say, 6 months.
oh, so it's really
It's I would say the first 6 months that was the toughest. From June 14th to the end of the year last year was brutal. Oh man, that was brutal. Um, and then around February, we started getting larger crowds. And then by April, we started getting I would say around average crowds. And then by May and June, the crowds got a little bigger. Um, Summer it kind of cooled down a bit, but now that we're into September, October, November, now we're seeing the crowds pick up again. So, and they're getting bigger. And so when you look at the analytics of the club, you actually see that there is a steady growth. There are some pops now and then, some dips, but every month over month, we grow slightly more and more and more. So I think we're eventually coming up to the tipping point where we'll kind of explode. Hopefully. So,
be there.
yeah.
So do you run 7 nights a week, or is it like
No. We do about we do about anywhere from 14 to 16 shows per month. So we're always open every Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, but then we also have the occasional Wednesdays because Kumar does Wednesday nights. Then we have Rishi's going to be starting up. He's a really great comedian here in Singapore. He's going to be starting up his bi-monthly show again as well. He was doing a space as well, so that'll increase the numbers. So I would say on average we're doing about 4 shows a week, and we're hoping that we can actually this time next year will be double that. That's my goal.
What have been the challenges of like setting up a, because you were effectively in a well-paid job outside
Yeah.
of, what the challenges of running a comedy club in Singapore, and how would, what the challenge of running a comedy club in Singapore as opposed to if you set one up like you have now in, I don't know, the UK or the US or Canada?
Well, rent is a big one. Um, because I know that if I was in Canada, the rent would not be nearly as high as it is right now for my commercial space. So, and that I would rent takes up about half of my budget every month, or half of my takings every month is just rent. Then you have your staffing, you have you pay taxes and your GST and work with your suppliers and you know so it's a real business. I mean, you really have to stay on top of it. People always ask me, oh, what's your day job? I'm like, would I have anything? Would I have time for anything else? So it's you have to run it like it's a business. So that means that when you have to look at it in terms of where can you cut costs, where can you scale back. At the very beginning, I was far too ambitious in terms of the numbers of shows I wanted to do. And so I was able to scale that back. I was able to scale back my staff. I was able to put more into our advertising. We are able to have more directed advertising. I would say the top three things in terms of percentage would be rent is number one, staff is number two, and advertising is number three in terms of costs that you have to do. So you have to kind of do like a balance, and you really have to look at it in terms of, you know, where's money coming in, where's money coming out. You run into the same things that you would run into, I think, with every business, with theft and people skipping out on their bills and things like that. So if once you get past that, the most wonderful part are the actual shows. So it's all worth it when you actually have an amazing show. Last Friday we had our open mic on Friday, Funny Friday, and it was an amazing show. We had 50 people came out and 50 amateur comedians, and everybody had just a blast. And when you're in that type of environment, all the struggles to get there just kind of fade away. And it was a really great night. And so we're seeing a lot more of those now, where people come in and they know that the Singaporean comedians are not world class comedians, and they're very, very supportive. That's one thing I love about Singaporean crowds. Really, really supportive crowds. We had one guy get up on stage last Friday and he froze for like a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And he got a massive round of applause, and he seemed to settle down and go right back into it. So that's what you got to love about Singaporeans. They want you to win. They're really rooting for you. So that I think the comedians are really starting to rise to the challenge now. And I've had comedians approach me and say, how do I get on to like the pro nights? What can I do to actually be a headliner myself? And so I challenged them and I pushed them. And so now we've actually, I'd say in the last 5 months, there's probably been 5 or 6 comedians who did their very first headline uh, right at the lemon stand. So, and they really rose to the challenge, getting ready to, deliver the comedy. It's really nice when you see that.
Hmm. You feel like a father. You're raising a pup.
Yeah. Yeah, like you were mentioning Jonathan Atherton before, and I have always considered him like the godfather of all the comedy here in Singapore. And I remember the very first night I met him, just a man who was just full of so much energy and really, really funny and really, really promoting comedy. And you just couldn't help get caught away or caught up in all of all of his jokes. And a really, really terrific guy. And I have to admit, he's missed on the scene for sure. I remember when he left Singapore because they didn't consider being a comedian an actual job in Singapore. So and I thought, man, the guy who actually started the whole thing here, and then he had to go off to Malaysia. So I have to admit, he was really the catalyst that got it all going here. So and he sparked a lot of. I think he's the one who inspired Umar to do Comedy Masala, and Comedy Masala, great comedy. Umar's done a wonderful job promoting comedy across Singapore, and still to this day, he has a great show every Tuesday at Heroes down on Circular Road here in Singapore. Great show. So it's really nice to actually, you know, see that because Umar is actually the one who kind of inspired me. The fact that he was doing it again and again, and he just kept going. So he was um, one of the people I really looked up to in this industry.
Hmm. Is he the guy that runs comedy in Pakistan as well?
Yeah, yeah. He's a
Ah,
Pakistani guy. He lived here for quite a long time, and I mean, once Jonathan got his the foothold of comedy going in Singapore, um, Umar kind of took the torch, and he's the one who kept it going even after Jonathan was no longer on the scene. Umar was still here, still running shows, still doing and a really good product as well. I know he had a lot of struggles trying to maintain, the comedy scene. It's like you're starting an entire industry by yourself from scratch. So I got to give him credit. He really, really hung in there. Even during COVID, he was still trying to do a lot of stuff. He still does his shows every Tuesday, even though he doesn't live in Singapore. He's still running Comedy Masala weekly shows here in Singapore, which is great. And the more comedy, the better.
and how does the marketing sort of what's the marketing like over here? Is it perhaps easier because there's less comedy shows to get people to come and watch shows, or is it harder?
Well, uh, you have to like my marketing's kind of spread between um, Facebook, Instagram, and Google Ads. So, and now we've actually just started concerted social media campaigns. So we can actually get more traction in regards to who's up and what's happening on a regular basis. So for me, it's been like drinking from the fire hose. It's just so much coming at you, and you're wondering, should I be going with this particular platform or um, because there's not a lot of choices. So I just want to have it so when people Google, comedy in Singapore, the lemon stand pops up right at the top, or things to do, and then it's like come out to the lemon stand. So I actually, what a strange thing, people have said I shouldn't do it, but I still do. I actually published my personal phone number is on our website. So anybody has a question, comes straight to my phone. So and I'll be like, hi, yeah, Lemon Stain can I help you. And a lot of times, sometimes it's my mom. So, so, but it's you have to do it because you want to make sure that people have a quick response. So the advertising aspect of it's still tricky because it's changing. It used to be email campaigns and you put up posters and things like that, but now it's all like social ads and uh, Google searches and things like that. So you have to make sure you stay more modern in terms of what you're doing, and there's definitely a cost associated with that. So, and there's a learning curve too. We've actually learned quite a bit. The mailing list, we have a mailing list, but last week I haven't sent it out my mailing list last week. I'm not convinced it's actually doing anything.
You know what?
So,
Yeah, I think so too. I think mailing lists are a bit of a. I've not found them very useful. I found in messaging people on the phone to be quite effective,
yeah,
but mailing, no.
yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking like, one thing that still does work are like bus ads or like ads on the subway or on the tube or on the MRT as they call it here. So I just don't have the money to actually put into that right now. I've already checked, and as soon as I have $15,000, I'm going to do one. So, but it's an expensive campaign, and but I've already thought out the campaign. I've already talked to them in terms of doing it, and now I just got to come up with the scratch. So, but we'll get there one day, and because they really do help. Having I know that in Singapore, it's very like London, where a lot of people don't drive. Everybody takes public transport. So having something on public transport does get a lot of traction because they're getting a lot of uh, you're on the subway and you see it all the time. So I've actually done some radio shows and where people have actually, I think I've had one or two people say, "I heard you on the radio when I was driving home," and in Canada that would be like, wow, because everybody's driving home in Canada. But in Singapore, everyone's taking the subway or the bus. So, that you have a very limited range on radio. So, you got to look at where people are, so it's one of the things I'm doing now.
Mm. It's what's yeah, that's an interesting. What's been a surprising thing that's worked for you? Because I've found that one thing that I thought wouldn't work, but does seem to work, is the good old fashioned putting leaflets through people's doors.
Well, I haven't gone that far, but one thing that worked that I found surprising was um, I probably would say um, I got somebody actually wrote a newspaper article about the club opening, and to be honest, I mean it was only in the physical newspaper, and when it came out, I was like, wow, look, this is great. And I didn't think anything was going to come of it because I know people don't really read newspapers anymore. But I was amazed on how many people actually learned about the club through the newspaper. And the biggest one, and this one's always been the one that I found the most surprising was when I said people, how did they hear about it? They said they Googled it. They Googled comedy club and the lemon stand came up. And there were other ones that were above us. Like we were not the top one. And they were like, oh, what's this one? And they clicked on it, came to our website, saw we had shows up, came out and saw the shows. And then they said what was really surprising were the reviews. Because I always encourage people to leave reviews, even if it's a bad review, leave a review. And I like when people do. So we had somebody leave a 1-star review, and uh, and somebody said, "Oh, you should reach out to that person." I was like, "No, you know what? If you read that review, you can tell that they were probably having a bad day." So I'm going to leave that up there. And another person gave us a 2-star review about the sound. They said, "Oh, I didn't like the sound. I couldn't hear anything." And so I went and I upgraded our sound. And then I replied and said, "You know what? Thanks for putting this in. I have now upgraded our sound. It's a lot better. If you actually DM me, I'll give you some tickets and you can come out and hear." And so I love when people actually leave the Google reviews. And I'm the host, so I seat people when they come in. And I've had people show up and go, you must be the owner, Lemon. I was like, yeah, yeah, that's me. And they go, I read about you on Google. And all the ads, they say the owner greets you at the door. And I was like, oh, Oh yeah, I guess a couple of people did say that. So it showed me that people were actually reading the Google ads. And I know I do. I always read the Google ads to see, is it really good? Is it good? If I don't see they didn't write anything, I won't actually read that ad. But if they wrote something, I'll definitely read what the ads are. So I think that was probably for me the biggest surprise next to the paper, the newspaper. My gosh.
It, it, how much, but you and yourself, like when you're going out with your wife and your kids, how much
Mhm.
do the reviews tell you about a place? I find that reviews tell me a lot about a place. So much.
Oh, a lot. I mean, it's like they'll say, "Oh, there's free salty popcorn, and there's you get a free half pint on the open mic on Tuesday, and they have some great. It's great ambiance, and it's somebody wrote bare bones bar but good comedy." And I thought, yeah, we are a bare bones bar. So, we have two beers on tap. We've got red and white wine, and we've got like four different types of liquor. I mean, that's basically the whole thing. So yeah, that's bare bones. So we'll get there, but I love getting reviews like that. So you learn a lot about it, and people post pictures of the stage, of the comedians, of the food and stuff like that. So yeah, you learn a lot on the Google reviews, especially by people who post pictures. Oh, I agree.
What one thing? How one thing in previous guests? I think maybe you've maybe looked at the episode, but it's with a called James. It was the episode called "Running the Fastest Growing Comedy Club in the Southwest" with James Atherton, I believe. I know his first name, but I've forgotten his surname. Never look.
I didn't see that episode. What did he say?
So let me have a look. It's James. No, it's James Alderton. James Alderton. That's it. That's his name. Not Alderson. Alderson. So
Okay.
he you mentioned there about you greeting people as they come in. And he mentioned when people see him outside of comedy, they expect him to be more jolly and more friendly. And he says, "I'm the most charismatic man in the freezer section in Waitrose." But that but it's saying, you have a private life, but when you go up on stage, you're the face of your brand and you got to make people feel comfortable. You got to make people feel
Okay.
nice. How do you manage to do that customer service on the door and like also as they're leaving? Because I myself is sometimes you're not in the right sharpness to engage. And occasionally, I'll be honest, the odd time here and there in the comedy club, I'll make a slight social mistake. But the thing with that social mistake, that's enough to put them off from coming in. Nothing dodgy, just like a little thing, that slight
Yeah.
little thing.
Well, actually, for me, it's just like, I mean, I put myself through college as a waiter. So when I was a waiter, I was the funny waiter. So I'd always say outrageous things and little quips while I was talking to people. So when people show up, I immediately start horsing around with them to try, get them in a good mood. And I try to, you know, coerce them to sit in the front row, and I tell them what's the specials are, things like that. Big smile and kind of get them like relaxed. And they always relax. And the thing is, it actually makes believe it or not, my favorite job is working the door. I love seating people at the lemon stand. When they come in, greeting them, hi, I write down everybody's name. Hi, and I just say, what's your name? And they go, oh, my name is, uh, you know, Ted or John or whatever. And it doesn't matter whatever name they say. I always go, oh, my brother's name is Nick. And I'll try to throw it like a little joke. So and they respond and they realize, oh yeah, we're here at a comedy club, and they relax. And then when you see some guy who's obviously there on a date, so and I say, oh, are you on a date tonight? Oh yes, it's our first date. First date. Wow. You know what? Comedians love it when you're on your first date. And they're like, oh no. So you kind of set them up on what to expect. So it is my favorite job. And I could have had the worst day. But as soon as I start working the door, I just started to feel better because I have so many people coming in and they're all looking forward to laughing. So that really kind of gets me going. And I I think I've only ever said one thing that puts somebody off. And do you want to hear what I said?
Go on, let's hear it.
This woman came in and she was pretty thin. She was pretty thin. And I said to her, oh, hey, was your mother a hippie? And she said, no. I said, well, you must have got those hips from somebody.
Whoa!
And she was not pleased, but the people she was with burst out laughing. They thought it was a great joke. So, but she wasn't she wasn't a big fan after that. But the thing is, you just give them a big smile and just say, "Hey, I'm just teasing, right? I mean, like, please don't take it too bad. Otherwise, you're gonna kill all the comedians who come up on stage, because they're going to be way worse than that." So you kind of like, you can sidestep out of it. But as it was, she was the only person who looked offended at something I said. So everybody else just and that's what I love about Singaporeans. They always they take everything you say with a pinch of salt. So, they don't really get offended at the things that you say because they know it's all in good fun. And I mean, that's what they're doing there in the first place. So though I did get a really interesting response once from a comedian I actually had. Danny O'Brien was headlining one time. He's from UK scene out in Ireland, and he said, "Wow, you're the only promoter I've ever seen work the door, clear tables, pull pints, and host the show." And I said, "So I have to. I can't afford anybody." So he really liked that. He thought it was really interesting because he'd never seen a promoter pulling pints before. So and I thought, well, you got to do what you got to do, right? So, but well, we will get there. I like meeting the promoters from other countries. I find them like a wealth of knowledge. And really, they're typically really, really nice guys, business oriented as well. I like seeing that.
Yeah, most, but that you're getting into a bit of a worm, getting into a bit of trouble there. Um, God, have you heard about the latest news in the UK about a famous
No.
comedian?
Oh, wait, which one?
He has fuzzy hair like John Lennon. He is a womanizer, and his surname begins with Brand.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Russell, by any chance? I've heard about that. Yes, but the thing is, he hasn't done comedy for a long time. So he's been doing that podcast where he every morning he gets up and goes over all the different things that's happening in the United States, isn't it?
Well, there's a big maybe this is going to take the topic in a bit of an iffy place, but I'm interested to hear what your views are on it as a promoter because there's so many complaints. I don't know, in America it's probably the same thing. I know a little bit about it, but in the UK there's a big documentary called Dispatches that was out, talking about how Russell Brand he's known as a womanizer. However, there's the I speak to so many comics on the UK circuit, and you hear a lot of green room chatter, and they always talk about how Russell Brand is a well-known person who's not so kind to ladies. He has the image of being a ladies, but he's and it's been an open secret, but people have been scared to say anything because of his lawyers and because of him having such power in the industry. And there's also a lot of
Oh,
reports like with comedy promoters and and big name comedians doing dodgy things to female comics and also even male comics. 'Cause one of the comics said to me, what's his face? Um, Darren Cannell said he was bothered by a male promoter, and the fact that he told him he wasn't into that inclination, the guy still bothered him.
wow!
But
I have to admit, I'm completely out of the loop on that stuff. So it doesn't surprise me though, because I mean you do see. people, I mean, anybody who's in a position of power is going to actually abuse that power at some point. And I also think, and then you have on the other side people who actually are targets because they're in a position of power. So I find that I myself, I love the female comedians. I wish we had more of them. And but I understand they actually have a pretty rough go of it in the industry. When you see like Jocelyn Chia when she got bashed for just telling jokes about Malaysia, and then even when you see comedians like Sarah Silverman getting sidelined by male comedians by her attitude, and I thought. You can actually say that there's a lot of male comedians who have very, very different attitudes uh, when they're off stage or in the green room as opposed to when they're on stage. So and they don't get the same type of flack. So I've got to admit, it's a really difficult industry for women to break into. I myself, I try to promote them as much as I can, and I still would like to see more of them. So, but yeah, I'm not really up to speed on what's going on with the to be honest, I anytime I
Nefarious.
started reading this part of the world, we're just so far out of what's happening in the West, that it doesn't really have any major impact on us. But we have our own politics here, so we don't need to import them.
But it, I'll ask one more thing on this, Matt. If you're a
Sure.
comedy promoter, how would you handle nefarious or dodgy things going on? Because people say that it's a difficult thing in comedy because there's no official HR. But how would you, as a promoter, handle uh, silly things going on in your comedy club if someone was?
Well, I've actually, okay, I'll give you a couple examples. I actually had um, most of my staff, actually all my staff right now are female. We've had some male staff, but they for some reason they don't work out as well. So the girls I have working with me, I've actually had some of them approach me and say, "Hey, this one guy, he's contacted me when we're not here, and I'm very uncomfortable around him." And I will immediately reach out. I'll take that comedian, pull him aside, and say, "Okay, this shit has to stop right now." And it's if you want to come back here ever again, then you're never going to contact her again. You got it? And they're like, oh yeah, 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 absolutely, no problem. So I mean, some of the more senior comics, I can't see them doing anything along the lines that would be anything untoward towards some of the staff or some of the female comics. Um, but I have actually stepped in on two occasions when somebody was uncomfortable about what a comedian was doing or what a comedian was saying. We had one guy who was he was sending texts that were uh, they seemed overly familiar. They weren't rude or anything like that, but they were overly familiar. And so I've had someone say, "Hey, this is not. I don't like this." And I've immediately reached out to him and said, "Hey, this has got to stop." And as it was, he wasn't on the scene for quite some time afterwards as well. We I take care of that right away because you got to try to remove the that aspect of it. And the weird thing is, I've also been accused of actually of being abusive towards women, and I was shocked. I have to admit when I got that. So I, and when that happened, I approached it head on in terms of like, we're going to discuss this and we're going to talk about this and things like that. So, and I had a lot of support when I was accused. So it's I've got to say politics always does play into it at some point or another.
Is it in some instances is it more miscommunication or and obviously in some instances though it is quite nefarious. And what would you say is the difference between? And that's a really
Well,
bigger
I
thing.
think age has a lot to do with it as well. I mean, um, in both cases, there was definitely the age of the person who was perpetrating the comments did play a major factor in what they were saying. So so when I spoke to them, they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that was I was stepping over. I was out of line." So so I think that there was, I would say, they weren't nefarious in terms of, they weren't, there was no, mean intention of it, though it did come across in each case creepy. And so they had to actually be aware that, that what they were doing was not being received the way they thought it was being received. And so they have to cut it out. This is, it's not, it's not like high school, you know. So where you can get away with saying certain things, or it's not like 1975 where the free love is gone now. So it's a completely different. I mean, the 20s is now a completely different social mechanism in terms of how we interact with each other, and now we bring in a lot of things like gender, and we also, in terms of, now they don't do that here in Singapore, but I know in the US they still have a lot of safe spaces and things like that. And I also know that, I mean, the comedy circuit in the colleges used to be huge back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, you made a lot of money doing the college circuits, and I know that comedians don't really do that now because there's a lot of pushback in terms of their types of humor, that not being acceptable in certain situations and things like that. So we're, from this part of the world, though, we're really kind of insulated from that. So and I think that the comedians, I think they themselves are, the ones in Singapore. It's not the same as if they were cutting their teeth in New York. It's here in Singapore. It's a lot more, a lot more, we give them a lot more leeway. We're not, and I know that promoters in the UK, I've met a couple, and they're very, very short with comedians, and so they can immediately kibosh something or somebody that annoys them, and they're out. So whereas here we don't really do that. Here we try to encourage them to, look at what they're doing, look at their comedy, see how they can find it a little more. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say more mainstream, but more along the lines of we give them more room to grow, and I think that's because uh, it's such a young industry here in Singapore than in UK, where it's been around for decades. So, I mean, there are some very, very big established clubs in UK. So, and those guys have a lot of say over who gets up on stage, and they have a giant pool with which to draw. So you don't have the same luxury here in Singapore. I think we'll get there one day. I think maybe in, in 10 years you'll see, will be a really vital part of Asian comedy, in
Hmm.
terms of growing up Southeast Asia.
But yeah, it's exciting. You mentioned before in the message, it's exciting to see where it goes.
It really is. I gotta say, it's, I when I actually quit my mainstream job so I could do this, um, geez, I had no idea it was going to be as crazy as it got. It was just, wow, so many things I didn't expect happened. And so it's, I gotta say, it's really changed the way I look at the entire scene. And but would I do it all again? Absolutely, because there've just been some wonderful moments where you see a new comedian break a new joke in, and it just delivers. So, and you've seen it where the crowds, like our last New Year's Eve show was off the hook. It was one of the best shows I've ever seen, let alone actually promoted. So, and I think we'll see a lot more shows like that. So, Kumar, who does the show, he's one of our top comedians here in Singapore. He sells out, you know, 2 Wednesdays every month and absolutely sells it out. And he does a great show. and he can do some very risque stuff, I gotta say, and it's really really nice seeing him out doing that because, I mean, he was one of the very first cutting edge comedians, I guess you would have to say, starting doing comedy literally back in the 80s here in Singapore. And everything's different now. So I'd like to see a lot more comedians like Kumar so that they could actually grow their careers just like he did. I mean the country has about almost 6 million people in it. So we have the people to do it. So I think we'll get there eventually. We really will.
And if there's one, if who are your favorite comedians in Singapore, and who's a what's the favorite what's your favorite bit you've seen that like a joke that
Oh,
you've really
okay.
admired by an act and you admired how it worked and how it got there?
Well, my favorite comedian in Singapore is I mean it kind of it changes. I have a number of them, but one of them who's very popular right now is Deepak Chandran. And he had this one joke which was so well written and so clever that I was so impressed by the joke. And he talks about how because he's from India, so he said, I've been in Singapore, from Mumbai, and my number one thing is to just never go back to India, and he talks about being an Indian in Singapore and in the world. And he talked about how Indians embrace. They don't tolerate, they embrace. And then he talked about how, when the Persians invaded, India embraced them because they showed up with samosa. And then when the Mughals came in, they embraced them because they had naan. And then said that. So now when you get samosa and naan, do you think of these other countries? No. Do you think of India? He said, and when the British showed up, we embraced them and we embraced their language. And that's why all the call centers are in English. And then he said, and then when they left, they went back to the UK. He said, and we're like, oh, we're coming with you. And he said, and we embraced them so much. Look who's running the country now, fuckers. So I loved how he actually tied that in. I just thought, oh my God, that's brilliant. So I have to admit, it was probably one of and now he did it very long, drawn out in and he has a wonderful delivery. But when he actually hit the Prime Minister of UK, it was just perfect. I thought, wow, what a great joke. Really, really, really well designed. So he's one of my favorites in terms of how he's actually, he writes all the time. He's constantly writing and he always wants to get up on stage. I love seeing that passion with any type of comedian. There's another comedian here in Singapore, Indian Singaporean guy who just writes all the time. And I saw his notebook. It was this thick and he left it in the green room one time, and I opened it up, and every page was full. It was just amazing. I thought, wow. And so I did what any promoter would do. I drew dicks on all the different pages.
And what did he do?
Getting I don't know if you can still hear me. I'm getting like somebody at my front door.
Okay,
So
no worries. Well, just
you can
one
hear
little thing. How do people find out about you
about me?
and the comedy club?
Well, mostly it's from the advertising. I would say. The newspaper was helpful. But I would say probably the newspapers or the ads that we do, and the fact that they've grown into the ads have actually spread to word of mouth. So now we get a lot more comedians showing up, uh, or sorry, audience members showing up who've never heard of the club before. We have this one popular YouTuber who's going up next week by the name of Ming Yu, and he's already sold the show out. And when people showed up the very first time he was in the club, I asked people, I said, "Oh, like, how'd you hear about the club?" And they said, "Oh, I follow him on YouTube, and he mentioned this club, and so that's why I'm here." And then people ask me, how many shows do you do a month? I'll say like, oh, like 15, 16. They're like, wow, I had no idea. So we're still not on the tip of everyone's tongue, but we're getting there, and I think it's word of mouth really helps. So uh, that's why I'm going to stick to it. I'll be here till the bitter end. Bitter.
But if someone's listening right now and they're in the UK or America and they want to find out about Lemon Stand or Lee McDonald, where did they go? Do they go on
Oh,
WhatsApp? Do they
go
go
to
on the website?
actually
Do they
they
go
should
on
go to the
Instagram?
website. Now they should go to the website, the lemonstand.sg. And I get a lot of inquiries asking about, I'm going to be coming through the region. Is it possible to get a spot? I always say yes. Um, even though sometimes the comedian's gone up and I realize later maybe I shouldn't have said yes. But I still always say yes. And the reason is, I actually once was going to Sydney, and I'd been headlining around different places in Asia, and I called them up. I said, "Could I just get like 5 minutes on the open mic?" And the guy was like, "No, you'd have to come out to open mic like 4 or 5 times before we even put you on the list." I was like, I've done this for a while. Oh yeah, whatever. And then the guy hung up on me. And I was like, okay, I'm never going to have that at my club. So now if somebody calls up and says, can I get a spot? Absolutely, you can, 100%. So, and I get a lot of people reaching out through the website. They info at the Lemon Stand, or my phone number is right there. And I tell people, WhatsApp me. So, and when people send me a message through the website, the very first thing that pops up is, if you like a fast response, just reach out to me. Here's my number on WhatsApp. And so I do get a lot of people following up, and I get a lot more comedians now. That in the last 4 months, I've probably had oh maybe I get probably about 3 or 4 a month that reach out and want to get a spot. So I mark them on the calendar and make sure they always get a spot. So I had a mentalist up on Tuesday. And yeah, so I'd never had, he's not really a comedian, so, but he wasn't bad. And I was like, you know what? Come on up. And he's like, can I get like 12 minutes? I was like, go ahead, let's do it. I've never had a mentalist before. So he was not bad either. The crowd enjoyed it. So I don't know if I could do a whole show on it, but I definitely give him a spot.
You could have a little
So
thing.
yeah, exactly. And we just had our F1. I gotta tell you, sometimes the holidays can really beat up the audience attending. F1 on Saturday night. We were not selling a lot of tickets on that night. Actually, the worst was the World Cup. World Cup killed business for 4 weeks. It was terrible. So, in the next World Cup, it's the Lemon Stand Sports Bar. I did 3 big TVs and just be open for all the games. That's what I'm going to do for 4 weeks in the next World Cup. I'm not going through that again.
Oh God, yeah, it's amazing what I've seen with so many bars. Like they're making 20 grand or something, 30 grand for just one weekend.
Oh yeah. So, well, you don't do that in drink sales in Singapore, really. Singaporeans are not big drinkers. They'll have one, maybe two, and which is really interesting because I once had these two old Irish couple show up, and they didn't have tickets for the show, and they were like, "Oh, we just wanted to come in for some drinks." I was like, "Really? In that case, come on in." And sure enough, they probably drank between the four of them. They drank $200. It was basically, I know, yes, yes, please come in. So I know because I'm an Irish Canadian. I know that when they show up, I love when the Irish show up. They're all for a drink or two or five. So and that was great. And we pour proper shots. at the lemon stand. Like we pour
Oh,
the ounce and a half, not those like 1 ounce shots. So those drive me nuts when you get like a little shot and you can't even taste the alcohol. So, but yeah, we're getting. That's why I make sure the drinks are good drinks at the. Though, however, we're gonna have to. By the way, we're raising our prices. Anyone watching, we're raising our drink prices in October, unfortunately, due to the high cost of supply. So
fair enough.
it's gone up quite a bit this year, quite a bit.
Really? Bloody hell.
Yeah, so over 20% in terms of costs for beer and spirits and wine.
20%.
20%. It's gone up this year since the beginning of the year to now. I was just like, wow, that's a lot. So, so now we have to kind of, I've been trying to hold off my price increase because I'm waiting until my supply is gone. But then when I re-up, it's 20% higher than it was at the beginning of the year. So now I have to actually go and offset our costs. So, but we do also have food. The hotel that we're attached to, we're like we have a separate entrance, and we're a separate part, but we're attached to a hotel, and so they get to do all the food. And I've got to say that's awesome. They can handle that. I have no issues with those guys doing the food. It's something that people like to have when they're actually at a club, and they like to have food. They have something to drink. So you have to supply those things, and then the comedy comes along.
Okay. And to anyone that's listening now, whether they be a bodybuilder, a comedian, a fighter, uh, a polo player, what last words do you have to say for the?
Well, my parting words, I would probably say, mm, you know, like opening a comedy club has actually been kind of a dream of mine, and one I never thought I would realize. And so I'll say that when you actually achieve your dreams, you it's a really there are, pursuing it is one thing, but you're never going to be prepared for everything that happens. So I recommend that you just kind of go for it, and and then really, really work hard when you're trying to get up and running. And then when you do, I think you'll if your passion is there and your work ethic is there, I think in the end you will actually succeed in terms of getting everybody on board and to support to making your dream longevity. So, I mean, I think anybody can open a comedy club, but can they keep it open? So if you look at that in terms of how it applies to other um, other industries or other jobs or other careers, I think it's the exact same thing. Once you get in the door, you have to actually maintain that work ethic of sticking to it and uh, really working through all of the difficult parts because it's going to be no matter what. I mean, I'm sure that you know Beckham, I'm sure he must have had some very, very difficult parts of his career, but he pushed through, which is why, he's Beckham. And or same with like Ronaldo and those guys. So I think that that happens for anybody, and you especially see it with comedians. Sometimes you'll see some of the comedians after a while they're kind of jaded in terms of like, oh, I thought it'd be further now, but it's when the ones who really, really stick to it and the ones who keep writing and they keep pushing the envelope, I think those are the ones that really win out in the end. That they adapt and they keep going. So that's I can tell you one thing, and in 6 more years we will still be here. I'm not going anywhere. So I that's I will I'm one of those tenacious promoters. I'll keep fighting until the day I retire. So, and I got a ways to go yet.
Yes, listen up, guys. He's not going anywhere. You can try anything. You can try putting poo through his door. You can try sorting him out, but he's there,
Yeah,
right?
and please don't take these as suggestions.
What should be a suggestion?
The Who through the door? Yeah, like yeah, don't do that one anymore.
Right. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure you give a 5-star review on Amazon iTunes. Give it a share. You know where the Lemon Stone Comedy Club is. And I'll
If
see
you
you in
want
the
to come
next episode.
by, I'll put you up.
And make sure you give him a discount. I'm joking.